All right. Who's excited about worship tonight? It's good. Who's excited about the word tonight? Woo. We like worship better. That's okay. I do too. We're going to dive in here to a part one of a message that we'll be doing at conference here next week. Or Saturday, I should say, right? Saturday. It feels like a month away, but it's coming on Saturday. Steve, can you cue my first slide? Thanks, Steve. God has a plan for your life. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah? I need lots of talking back. I really do. Because we're bringing in a couple guest speakers on Saturday, and they want to hear you communicate with them, and I want to hear you communicate with me. So, God has a plan for your life. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah. What in the world does that mean? He has a purpose for you. He has dreams for you. He has so much that he wants to accomplish in and through you. But when somebody says that God has a plan for your life, it's so vast, so empty, but yet so reassuring, isn't it? So reassuring to think that the God who made the universe, that made the person sitting next to you, or the person that will pick you up tonight, so reassuring to know that the God that made them, the God that cares about them, also cares about you and has a plan for you. The God that made me and put me into the platform and space that I'm in is the same God that's going to put you into the platform and space that you will be in. God has a plan for you. But sometimes, as we think about the plan, purpose, and even the future that God has for our lives, we get really stuck in the weeds and go like, I gotta know. What's my next step? What am I supposed to do? What is purpose? I don't have any. Because, let's just be real, we get into the mundane of school, we get into the mundane of walking out our everyday job, or that job that you work once a week because you're still in high school, right? And you're just kind of like, why did I wake up this morning? Because I just did the same thing that I did yesterday. And my classes at school are so boring, and I'm not learning anything. And I learned everything in the first half of the year, but nothing now. And maybe you're an athlete, it's the off season, you're just kind of like, I'm sick of working out. I'm sick of building for something that seems like it's never going to come, right? But we're going to go to a story in the Bible here. Talk a little bit about it. I want to set it up for you. So there's this time in the Bible when there's all kinds of wickedness going on, all kinds of different things happening, and you know that it's in the Bible everywhere, right? It's just like, oh, which part of the Bible are you talking about? I'm talking about the part before Jesus. So we'll be in the Old Testament in the book of Esther. And there's this king, and he is pretty wealthy, pretty amazing. King Xerxes, actually, it says here that for 180 days he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. I'm going to be honest, but I mean, that sounds a lot like he was making himself to be God, doesn't it? Like to say that, he's so wealthy, there's so much vastness to his glory, and even to go as far as like his majesty just took 180 days to display. Sounds like he had elevated himself into the place of God just a little bit too far. Well, it goes on to say that he puts together this feast, and they have this party that essentially just doesn't stop because they have so much that they don't have to work or do anything. They can just enjoy for 180 days. And he has a queen that is part of his kingdom, right? And he wants to show off his queen too, right? And let's just be real. You know, you might not think that sounds very weird because he's just the king and he wants to be like, wow, look at my beautiful wife, right? Well, it would be a little weird if I asked Jessica to stand up on top of the chair and just wave nicely like a princess, right? Just a little bit, almost disrespectful, actually. Just gotta mute our phones. Kind of disrespectful. He calls his queen out, and his queen just says, nope, I'm not about that. I'm not going to be subject to just doing exactly what you say. So here's what happens. He says, he always goes to this group of individuals that is considered his advisors, right? And he's talking to them and discussing, like, what's going on? What are we going to do with this queen who's just saying no to me, right? You can't say no to the king. So they say, well, just like we would do with anyone else, let's just put her to death. So they put her to death. No more Queen Vashti. Removed. Absolutely. See, the king was really drunk and had no idea what he was doing. So when he came to, he was like, oh, shoot, I did not actually mean to do that, but I was drunk, and that's why it's not good to get drunk, okay? Please don't drink. Next, he gets this group of people together and says, what do we do now that we have no queen? We need to go find one. So they put on The Bachelor, female version, Bachelorette. No? Bachelor. They put on The Bachelor, right? They did. You guys ever seen The Bachelor? Have you heard of The Bachelor? Okay, so a group of people compete to get married to one person. It's kind of weird. I'm not really about it. I think it's really strange to develop all these really deep relationships with multiple people at the same time, and I don't know why it makes it okay just because it's on TV, okay? But King Xerxes did it. Not a godly king. I said that already. He's a wicked king, okay? But he did that across his whole land, and he sent those advisors out to bring in different people that could be queens. So he's just like, take the most beautiful, the ones that aren't weak, the ones that are going to have a lot of kids for me, and make sure that my wealth goes on into the next generation. Gets to the very end of the pick, and he comes up with Queen Esther. She's made queen because she's found to be the most beautiful and the most smart, and she passes all the tests. If you watch VeggieTales, I think she's a really good singer in that movie. Right? So we've mixed The Bachelor with American Idol. And she sings really well and makes sure that the king is all about her singing voice. And she gets to have the throne. Now, the thing about Esther that we just need to talk about for a minute is that she was an orphan. She actually didn't have parents and was being raised by her uncle, and so she had kind of probably carried around a spirit of abandonment. I don't know if any of you have like really close aunts and uncles, but my aunts and uncles are great people. I love them, but honestly, it doesn't matter how great of a person they are. It would be really weird to just all of a sudden have to live with them and have them raise me if my parents died. I wouldn't ever really feel like I had parents. Just feel like I had people that tell me what to do. She's not helpful. Right? She didn't ever have anyone that was showing her love or attention, and her uncle did a really good job, but still probably really struggled with that orphan spirit, right? And I just think that's important to notice in this story because she's forced to lean into God. Now get to the point. Her uncle Mordecai has a good relationship with her and finds out that there's a plot to kill all of the Jews that live in this kingdom. Now you guys know that the Jewish people are God's chosen people from the beginning of the Bible. They're the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and meant to usher in the kingdom of God by bringing forth Jesus through the bloodline of the Jews. Are we tracking? That's a lot of lineage really fast. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the grandfathers to King David, who is the grandfather to Jesus. Does this make sense now? Following. You're not saying you're nodding. Are we following? Okay, good. So from the beginning of time, we've had a struggle, two powers, right? We've had good powers and we've had evil powers. We've had someone that wants to worship themselves and someone that wants to just lavish us with good gifts. Can we tell the two apart? We have someone who wants to worship himself. His name is Satan. He was originally created to worship God. He lived in heaven with God, actually. But he was such a skilled worshiper of God that he was like, wait, why am I not getting more attention about how good I am at this? And began to worship himself. And that's what ultimately threw him from heaven. But God's been over here the whole time in perfect justice and mercy, wanting to love us. And so we see this split in the Bible of the Jews, the Jewish people, the Israelites, always fighting with everyone. Or with the kingdoms of the world, right? Because they're fighting with the principalities and the powers of darkness that are trying to remove the possibility of Jesus coming forth into our world. Does that make sense? So the importance here is that even in the book of Esther, there were people that were advising the king, not necessarily the king that had this plan, but people advising the king to kill the Jewish people because they knew that through the Jewish people, something prophetic was going to happen. Something grace-filled was going to happen. Something that would bring life to all people, and they didn't really want that. They wanted it for themselves. And don't you know that the spirit of generosity, when we give a gift, it feels really good, but sometimes the challenge to get ourselves to give the gift is really hard, and so we just try to keep it all for ourselves. That's kind of what this looks like. So Mordecai, her uncle, uncovers this conspiracy against the people, and plot twist, Esther is a Jewish girl. She's from the descent of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And she is caught in the middle of this. So in Esther chapter 4, Mordecai goes to her. And in verse 12, we'll move forward here just a bit. In verse 12, what do I have on the screen? Verse 12? Okay. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Because Esther said to Mordecai when he went to her and he said, hey, can you help? Can you get the ear of the king? Can you help figure out how we're going to solve this problem that they're conspiring a plan to kill all the Jews? Esther said, no, I'm not about that. That sounds really crazy. But Mordecai said this to her response of not wanting to help. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. This is the light bulb moment for Esther. It's the opportunity right in front of her. It took her uncle saying it over her for her to realize, hey, maybe you've been wondering why you got to become queen. Maybe you looked around you and you saw all of these other really beautiful women and all of these other really talented people that were also good singers and dancers or whatever, right? And you just kind of were like, why did he pick me? Why did God allow me to step into this place? I don't know if you've ever felt that in your life, but I have felt that in my life a lot. And I would call that imposter syndrome. Where no matter how equipped, called, purposefully placed you are, you feel like an imposter. And the enemy is on your shoulder telling you that you didn't prepare enough, you're not good enough, you don't know how to do it as good as someone else, you don't know what to say as well as someone else, and there is someone else that can just do it better than you, so you should just back off. But the thing that I need you to realize tonight is that God has a plan for you, and you need to recognize his plan. And when you recognize his plan, you need to shut the door on the enemy's voice. I'm in the back of the room here worshiping, and we've got a lot going on, conference prep, all that stuff. And I just realized that I was going to talk about the book of Esther, but I didn't ever read like the whole book of Esther. Just kind of read the stories as I was going to preach them and some of the verses and cross-referenced and all that. But I didn't like read the book from front to back. And immediately when I like put that together with my brain, Satan was right there in my ear. And he said, are you actually going to talk about this? You have no idea what you're talking about. You know that there's people in the room that probably know the story better than you. They've probably done a few Bible studies on Esther. Why are you even going to try to preach on Esther? Why are you even going to try to teach on Esther? And in that moment, whatever that moment looks like for you, whether you're sitting down to a math test or you're stepping into an uncomfortable conversation, you're going to a basketball game or a sporting event, or you have the opportunity to talk to that one kid at school that's just not in a good spot. We have to say no to that voice and shut that door and believe that God put us into this place for a reason. That maybe, just maybe, He put us into this position for such a time as this. Jeremiah 1:5 says this about God towards us. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah was swept up into a vision, and he heard the voice of God say this to him. It's been recorded in the Bible for us to read and for us to see, and even for us to reference that God knew you before you were even a thought. And that's one thing to think about it on this side, but think about it on the other side. When you were your parents' age, when you were your grandparents' age, like if your grandparents are like Annalise old, right? God still knew you. God still knew you and had a plan for how you were going to impact the world around you. And I was talking to some students a few weeks back, and this is what I kept being drawn back to. This idea, right? Because you think, like, how does that even work? Like, there's so many happenstance, chances, things that could happen that would make me not actually exist, right? But here's how I believe that it works. I believe that God has a perfect plan for your life, and you have the opportunity to walk in it in its fullness or in its incomplete form. You have the opportunity to walk in the fullness of the favor and plan that God has for your life, or you have the opportunity to just kind of do it. And that's where those decisions come into play. That's where our mentality and our prayer life and our reading the scripture and putting him first. I had a decision today to be intentional with how we were going to structure our Wednesday night service and how the sermon was going to look, but it wasn't going to change whether or not it happened. It was happening either way. But I had a chance and an opportunity to walk into it in its fullness or into it in an incomplete sense. And you have that same opportunity. As you recognize God's plan, you have the opportunity to honor his plan in your life. I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know where you're at. That could look like just sitting in your bed and reading your Bible instead of doom scrolling. That could look like waking up and praying instead of just not praying, or watching Netflix, or getting the latest vlog as you're getting ready for the day. Right? We can walk in the fullness of what he has for us, or we can just take a fraction of it. We can say, I'm going to live this moral Christianity. I'm going to live out the morals of the Bible because these seem right. The spirit of truth that is inside of me, it really aligns with the right and wrong things. I don't want to murder anybody. I don't want to have sex with a bunch of different people. I don't really want to do drugs. I'm into this moral idea of Christianity. I'm all about it. This is cool. Let's not steal. That's good stuff, right? I like the idea of Christianity in that sense. But do you align yourself with the principles of God when it comes to stepping into the fullness of what he has for you, when it comes to walking by the Spirit, when it comes to being intentional with your in and out moments, with the things you listen to, the things you watch, the way you spend your time? Are we in that place all the time? I would like to think that we can try, but we're probably not, right? That's why it's a daily battle. It's a journey of honoring the plan that he has for his life. When Esther recognized the plan that God had for her life, when Mordecai spoke this over her, when he said, relief and deliverance from the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Two pieces of this verse that I really love, and we'll go back to it on the screen just so you can kind of see where I'm at, okay? I've got a pointer. You can't see it because it's an LED screen. Relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, halfway down. This highlights the principle that I was just sharing with you. God will bring Jesus forth through the Jewish people, whether or not Esther intervenes. But she has the ability to show honor to God and honor to her family by walking out the gospel for her life, by walking out the plan of God on her life. Just like you have the opportunity to change history for you and for your family. You may not be the difference maker in whether or not Jesus comes back. Do you understand that? But you're the difference maker for your family. You're the difference maker for the generation that will come after you. You may be the difference maker for your friends, for your entire high school class. Heard a testimony as I was reading a book about a young man in 6th grade who started walking in circles around his school every day before class, praying for his classmates by name. He had a roster of all of their names, 250 or some names in that class. So a big community, just in his class, 6th grade class, big school, big community. He's walking around praying over them, and he started inviting them to a prayer meeting on Friday nights. And then he would walk around the school, just him, by himself, with the Lord. He would walk around and pray for each person by name. Say, God, would you find their heart? Would you come into communion with them? Would they know who you are as he walks around? And then he would invite them week after week after week. By the time he got to 8th grade, there were 250 people meeting in the gymnasium at the school on Friday before class. All of his class. There was just a few that weren't represented. Did that change the course of our history? In many ways, it might, right? Did it change my life without me knowing about it? Probably not, right? But all of the people that he affected, all of the people that got to know Jesus because of his prayers, because of his intentionality. That's what's before us, friends. That's what's before us with this opportunity. When we honor his plan and walk in the fullness of what God has for us, we have the opportunity to change the world around us. And I believe that this generation is different in the sense that I actually think you will see fruit. So many times in years gone by, pastors and leaders and prophets have said that you just got to live it out for Jesus and you might never see an impact. Well, I'm here to tell you right now that if you live out your life for Jesus, sold out in every way, you will see an impact. It's not that you're not going to see an impact, because you know what? The world around us is too dark for it not to see you shining brightly. There's too much darkness out there for them not to see your light shining brightly when you honor God's plan for your life. Jeremiah 29:11 through 13 says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart. Who wants to know and find God in the room tonight? Who is willing to seek God with all of your heart? That's the question before us. That's the question before us. Are you willing to open up and reveal the deepest parts of yourself to God so that he can reveal to you what he wants to do with your life? We want to know, God, how are you going to use me? Where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do with myself? Well, hey, are you even seeking him? Fully, like with all of your heart, with everything you are? Or are you asking for all of those things, but just living with a measure of grace in your life and not a fullness of grace in your life? Because there's a fullness, and I'm telling you right now, when you walk in the fullness, it's like you wake up with the joy of the Lord, and he begins to bring strength even to your body, and he begins to bring a smile to your face. But it takes intentionality. It takes focus, and it takes a willingness to lean in and just surrender who you are to the plans of God. One more verse, and I'm going to have that worship team come up. They're going to play one song really quick before we head into small group. The verse is Psalm 32:8. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Here's the reality, is that we just have no idea up from down sometimes. those same students that I was talking about having, living into the favor of God in their lives, it was the context of this that there's two really good decisions in front of you. There's not a wrong one. Think of it like this. There's two really nice houses. You've had them inspected. The framing's all good. The roof looks good. It doesn't leak. All the faucets turn off and on really well, unlike mine. Right? It works good. The hot water's hot. The heat's good. The AC works. The yard is nice. There's nothing wrong with either of them. They're the same price. You have two really good decisions in front of you. What do you do? What do you do when it's no longer what is right and what is wrong? What do you do when it's no longer take drugs or don't take drugs? Cheat on my test or don't cheat on my test? Those are easy decisions, right? Maybe hard in the moment because you struggle with that, or you're a little bit interested in what it might feel like to be on drugs, or you really want to cheat because you need the A to stay in sports or whatever, right? But what about the decision where there's two really good things in front of you? That's the opportunity that's in front of us all too often as we step into new seasons of life, when we're following Jesus to the fullness. House number one is the one the Lord wants you to be in. And in that home, you will find peace and prosperity, and you'll enjoy it, and it'll be so good, and you'll get to know your neighbors. And house number two will be a perfect house in every sense, right? But you might have rough neighbors. You might end up having a tree fall on the roof, and then all of a sudden you get all wet in the middle of the night. No way of knowing, right? But this is what I'm talking about, walking in the fullness of what God has for you. He has such good plans for our life, such intentional plans for our life, such meaning and purpose for our life. And if we're willing to seek Him with everything that we are, I believe that yes, we will go through hard things. Hard things happen to good people. All of the time, I have been through hard things. My wife and I have lost a baby. My wife and I have struggled financially. My wife and I have had a tree almost fall on our car. Like, we've had stuff happen. Does that mean that we weren't pursuing God to the fullness? I really don't know. I might know in heaven's side. I don't know. But what I do know is that in this season of my life, right now, what I would like you to do alongside me is chase God in the fullness and know that if we walk out the plans that He has for our life, and if we're so intentional to the point of wanting to know Him, wanting to know what He has for us, that maybe, just maybe, there's something even better than those two houses. Maybe, just maybe, He has something even better for your life in store. So I just want you to sit in the presence during this song. You can worship if you want to, but just enjoy the presence of the Lord and really think about, what does that look like for me? How is He calling me to step into the fullness more? How is He calling me to be more intentional with my time? What does it look like for me to trust God with the plans that He has for my life, so that I stop striving for something and just start surrendering to everything that He has for me?